Hey guys, welcome to Get Your Bell Rung, a pro wrestling podcast. I am your host KG, and with me I have such a terrific individual, a woman that I was so fortunate to meet in Las Vegas during the 59th annual Cauliflower Alley Club reunion. I have with me none other than Lynn Anoa'i. See, I told you I'd get it.
You almost got it.
Yep,
Anoa'i. It's a
Anoa'i.
pleasure to
Yep.
be here. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And if you guys recognize the last name, of course, it's because she is part of wrestling royalty. She really is. She is the widow of Alpha, one of the legendary Samoans in professional wrestling. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for coming on. It is absolutely a pleasure to be able to talk to you about your husband and as well as about the royal family that you are very much involved with.
Mhm.
Uh, as I said, you were married to Alpha, legendary Samoa, part of the Wild Samoans. You guys were married 50 years, I believe it was. Tell me about the very first time you met him and what was it like initially when you first started dating each other?
Well, rewind your mind back. I was 16 years old when I met him. And we really didn't start dating until I was after 18 years old. But when I met him, obviously it was at a professional wrestling event, and it definitely changed my life. There's a picture that has been, it's on all of the social media of our very first date, and we're sitting in a bar, and it was on in Staten Island, New York, where I'm from. It was after a wrestling show, and it was back in the 70s, where a minor can sit in the bar with a beer in her hand. But yeah, that was kind of, I guess you would say, our first date.
Now, you are 16 at the time you first met him. I mean, even were you um not really threatened, but intimidated by meeting a guy? Because I mean, look, I heard that he had the biggest heart in the entire world, but to see him as a wrestling figure, a lot of people were scared of Alpha. Did that not take factor into you meeting him?
There's a couple of stories that go around, and my favorite version is the one that Alpha told, and that was that I was the true wild Samoan, and I wanted to see just how wild he was. That's the story that he tells. But yeah, I mean, imagine, to give you a little background, like how we met, how I got into professional wrestling. It's my brother is the one who gets the credit for that. My brother was a die-hard wrestling fan, and he used to go. We lived on Staten Island in New York, and he would go to Madison Square Garden every month on a Monday. And you would get online during intermission to buy your tickets for the next event. He would not miss a show. So this one particular time, he would go with his buddy, and his buddy could not get off work. So he said, "Well, I have to go. Bruno Sammartino's going to be in a cage match, and that's the end of the world." So he begged me to go with him. And, I was on the fence about wrestling. I mean, he watched it, my family watched it. I really didn't. So I said, "Okay, wait." I was a young teenager. I can go into Manhattan on a school night. We would take the bus in, and we would go out to eat and hang out outside Madison Square Garden, and, meet all these wrestlers as they would get out of taxis and go inside the arena. And best part was I can stay out super late, and we take the subway home. Yeah, I'll go. And so we just wanted to go to the shows, and that's, kind of how my wrestling life began. And so when I met Afa, I was 16, and I was at a wrestling show at my high school, and he was actually running the event, and which I didn't know at that time. So he's in the, how like they have the high school has the
Mhm.
locker room door, and they had it all taped up, and I was walking by with my friends, and I just see this hair sticking out with this little face, and I walk by, and he looks at me, and I look at him, and we make eye contact. And my first reaction was run the other way. What the heck? And I look, and I stopped, and I turned around, and he went, "Pretty." I said, "Oh my gosh." I ran the other way. And then curiosity brought me back. And I walked past the locker room again and I looked at him and he just looked at me and he stared at me. And that was the first time that we met.
Now, let's take Alpha out the equation just for a moment.
Sure.
Um, you were 16 when you met him. Now, as you said, it was after 18 before you guys started dating. So
Mhm.
within those 2 years, because of your that meeting and because of attending this event with your brother, did you then become a professional wrestling fan?
I was a fan, definitely. And, you know, I was a young girl when we were going to the wrestling shows in Madison Square Garden. And I will never forget this story. I was about 14 years old and we pull up. There was this, after the Madison Square Garden, everybody would race up to this bar called the Savoy Lounge. And you got to hang out with the wrestlers. It was a big thrill. And Bruno Sammartino was in the restaurant having dinner.
Oh, wow.
So here I am, just this kid. I walk into the restaurant. I didn't realize, it was a very distinguished restaurant, and there was bodyguards around. And I just walk in. I walk up to the table, and they stop me, like, I didn't know what was going to happen to me. And I just had my little piece of paper. I just wanted this autograph, and there was a photographer there. So Bruno stops the mob, and he says, no, wait. And he signs my autograph and he took a picture with me. And I have the picture, it's out there on somewhere on social media. And I never forgot that day. And so, many years later, when we talk about later on, I'll tell you stories about Bruno and that picture and that meeting. So, yes, I was definitely a fan.
Being that this was at Madison Square Garden, and you're talking about Bruno Sammartinez, was this during the days of the WWF and Vince McMahon Sr.?
Yes, it was. Absolutely. Yes.
Now, at any point, did you have any interactions with Vince McMahon Sr.?
I did meet him. I actually met him in Allentown, Pennsylvania. That's where they used to run their TV tapings back in the day. And so they were very accessible. I mean, it was very easy to meet everybody. And I would go with my family and my mom, my brother, my sister, my youngest sister. And my oldest sister didn't really have an interest in wrestling, so she would stay home with dad. But we would go, and it was just so much fun. And, you got to meet these heroes. I mean, we had to stay up on watch WOR TV Channel 9 and black and white TV to catch wrestling at midnight, on the weekend. And so, yeah, we got to meet Vince Sr., and he was just such a wonderful man.
So, as you said, 16 when you first met Alpha,
Mhm.
you didn't start dating after you're 18. Talk to me now about your 18. What was it, another event that brought you back into his life and then you guys started dating?
Well, I would see him a few times a month because he
Mhm.
would come into, he was up in Connecticut, and he would come into New Jersey, New York, and different places. And he would tell me, you got to come to the show and hang out and whatever. And I would, and then he would come when he would do the TV tapings every 3 weeks. So I would see them in Allentown. So I was always around, and he was always around. And so, yeah, so I, got to know him that way.
Once you guys started dating, did you start traveling with him right away, or was it not until after you guys were married?
Yeah, it was later, that we would travel, but could you imagine bringing him home?
I
You
that
have
was
kids?
my that was my next question. Was I have a daughter that I was. I
Okay,
mean, I
so
have three kids, two boys and a daughter, and I love them boys to death, obviously. But to a father, your daughter is precious. I can only imagine what I would have thought by bringing someone home that looked like Alpha. What was your dad's reaction?
well, when I was just really getting to know him, my dad was actually getting sick. He had cancer way back then, and he just was not happy about the whole thing. Absolutely not. There were so many reasons why, but he's like, no, 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 no. My mom, on the other hand, she just said, you just done lost your mind. But he was the nicest person, that you ever would want to know.
Right, right.
It was pretty amazing.
Now, let's talk about the flip side of that, though. Again, there's been so many reports about how kind he was, the big heart he had.
Hmm.
And that's how they describe the whole Samoan family. But
Yeah.
as an 18-year-old girl meeting his family, that also had to be a little intimidating for you.
Yeah, it was. And, I didn't really meet like his brothers and sisters and dad
Mhm.
and, till later on. But, I got to meet his kids because he had kids. And it's interesting. It was interesting. And, the traveling and it was fun. It was um, not your normal life, let's put it that way. When my friends were just hanging out in the neighborhood and, going to school and whatever, I was, one of my favorite pickup lines that he used on me is the old atlas map.
Right.
Nowadays you just Google, well, we had the actual map. And he hands me the map and he's like, here. And what am I going to do with this? Open it up, pick a page, wherever you want to go, and I'm going to take you there. That's a young girl hearing that,
Right.
seeing this amazing man from television when your friends are just kind of hanging out, at the coffee shop or whatever, the burger joint. And, here he was handing me this opportunity to travel the world. So it was pretty crazy. Kind of like
Now,
people used to compare us to, Elvis and Priscilla. That was kind of like,
wow. Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Talk to me though about the different cultures, right? So,
Hmm.
my wife, she's Cambodian.
Okay.
So when I first met her family, amazing people, and I love the culture. But at first, it's a little bit of a culture shock, right? Did you
Hmm.
go through that as far as meeting the Samoans and their culture versus what you were accustomed to?
Oh, yes. The Samoan culture is the most amazing, beautiful culture
Beautiful.
that
Yep.
you could ever imagine. I mean, everybody loves everybody. Everybody gets along. Everyone's accepted. And it's so beautiful. And so it was easy to fall in love with that culture. The elders are treated with the utmost respect and they are served first and they are cared for, and it's so different than the world that we have where like, you're 18, you move out of your house, you start your life. But in the Samoan culture, the girls stay back and take care of their families and just stay with them forever. So it's really a beautiful, different, amazing lifestyle.
Yeah, and I mean, just the culture of their food as well. It's
Mm,
I've been able to experience it, and oh my gosh, and it really is a beautiful culture. Now, unfortunately, we lost for August of last year, I believe
yeah.
it was.
Hmm.
Um, and this question was actually much later on, but I want to ask you this because we were talking about the culture of the
Sure.
Samoans. After he passed away, um, tell me about the mourning process and how being that your in-laws were Samoans, beautiful culture, big
Hmm.
time family first type of a culture. Um, how was their embrace towards you with getting through this?
It was amazing. Of course, my mother-in-law and father-in-law are both deceased, and um, so I was am still very close with the brothers and sisters that are left, and they were just amazing. And we stayed in touch, because Alpha had been sick for quite some time. So throughout that journey, about a good almost 11 years that he was going through health complications, we always stayed together and stayed in the loop. And even though they were so far away in American Samoa, WhatsApp and Facebook, we were able to really stay in touch. And up until, the very end when he passed away, and his funeral, his memorial service, we put a lot of it on Facebook so that his friends, family, fans can be part of it because Afa was very public and he loved his extended wrestling family, his wrestling students. And so he wanted everybody to share in his life. And so the family that could be there were, and the ones that couldn't be there because, just 2 months before they buried Sika. So it was a very difficult time. And just the love and the support was unbelievable.
Now we talked about the royal family.
Mhm.
Currently, we have the Roman Reigns, the Usos, so many people are
Yes.
part of that bloodline. I mean, not just in WWE, but in many different other promotions
Mhm.
as well, which is essentially carrying on the legacy of Alpha. Uh, does that gives you this certain sense of ease or thankfulness that you have, this in the wrestling world continuing carrying on his legacy?
It absolutely does. You know, together when I married him, when I dated him and married him, he was a professional wrestler. And then as he got older and as life changed, he became a trainer, one of the best trainers in the world. Back in the 1980s, Vince McMahon himself sanctioned our pro wrestling training center,
Oh
the Wild
wow.
Samoan Training Center, because AFA produced so many stars. And the training was top of the line. People came from all over the world, men and women alike. We actually had a house in Pennsylvania where we had a finished basement, and I cannot tell you how many people lived in my basement, from the blood, to just these extended family of wrestlers that are still very much in our life today. Um, so the legacy that he created, that we created together, was incredible. We ran the school, we ran the promotion. We started with a Trans World Wrestling Federation, and then later on had changed it to WXW Wrestling because TWWF was too close to WWF, so we couldn't trademark it. So we changed it to Top Row Productions WXW Wrestling, and we ran that together for years and years and years. So the legacy that lives
Right.
on, is just amazing.
Now, again, as we talked about, Alpha, the Baltimoreans in general, they were known for having big hearts
Yeah.
outside of the ring, but they were also known to not be messed with. And unfortunately, you have knuckleheads that want to challenge them. Were there times that you felt like, "Ah, I really hope I don't get a phone call tonight that some idiot tried to challenge my husband and he had to fight him?"
Well, luckily, a lot of the time I was traveling with him. So, but
Right.
nobody really challenged them. I think they knew their reputation was one thing, but they could back it up, and they knew that. So there wasn't really the challenges. There were things. I'll tell you, Puerto Rico was probably the toughest for them, for Alfonseca.
Yeah.
They were so hated there back in the 70s and early 80s, and these are true stories. I've witnessed it with my own eyes, where the people would save their kids dirty diapers. They would often Sika wrestled barefooted. They walked barefooted. So they would throw thumbtacks and glass. They would throw fire, matches, whatever down when they were walking because their hair, and throw the diapers at them. It was insanity. But we were at an event, and it was a biker club crew that was doing this event, and one of the guys threw a raw fish at Asa,
Mm.
and it fell on the floor, and it was just whatever, and they just thought they were being really funny, and he picked up that fish and he just started ripping it apart and eating it, and these grown men were throwing up because he just was, so people were careful to challenge him, but I've seen him lose his temper, choke a few people out. Yeah.
Yeah. And include myself. I often complain about a lot of the wrestling fans today because of the negativity that they like to spread on social media. But in a way, the wrestling fans today are not as dangerous as they were back in those days. I've heard stories from your Dusty Rhodes, your Jimmy Cornettes about these fans throwing acid, batteries,
Mm-hmm.
trying to attack, damaging cars. With you traveling with them, was there times that maybe in even Puerto Rico, where you said that they were truly hated? Were there times that you felt unsafe and very nervous about a particular event that you guys were
Oh,
participating in?
many times I would be so afraid. the Madison Square Garden, they'd have to leave in the paramedics would take them out in an ambulance because they would want to flip the cars over. You
Right.
know, it's oh yes, it was crazy. But I will tell you, wrestling fans are the greatest fans in the world.
Right.
They are
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah,
So
they're definitely they're the most loyal and the most
yeah,
patriotic
and
individual.
respectful. They really,
Yeah.
really are respectful. Yes.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now you have your sons, Sabu and Alpha Junior, that's following in their dad's footsteps, correct?
And L.A. Smooth Lloyd.
Right.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah, the three boys all wrestle.
Now,
Yeah.
but here's my question.
Hmm.
There's a difference between your husband doing this versus your baby boys doing this, who are now men, obviously, right? As a mother, how do you feel about them following in their father's footsteps?
Well, I'm a mom and a stepmom to the whole family, you know, and I will tell you, it didn't matter if it was Alpha or if it was the boys or if it was the grandkids. Anytime that they got in the ring, you know, I always said a prayer. I always prayed. I know that they can take care of themselves. They are all athletically gifted. This is what they are all meant to do. You know, they're just amazing. But it doesn't make it any easier to watch them. You know,
Right.
you're just always hoping that they're not going to get hurt. And yeah, so
Yeah. Now, with your last name being the way it is, I'm sure that when people find out who you are, you must at some points live a crazy life. How did you manage to keep your life even somewhat normal
that's
with having the husband that you
a
did, and
funny
even
one.
today with having the last name that you did? 'Cause look, I'll be honest with you. As the one that does a podcast, right? As the one that I want people like you on the podcast in Vegas, when K9 came to me and told me that you were coming on to do a quick interview, I crapped to myself because I'm like, holy crap! Like this is not just someone who was married to a famous wrestler. This is someone who was married to the royal family, right? So how do you manage to keep your life even, normal in the smallest way?
I think normal went out the window a long time ago, you know, and it, it's Alpha was always very humble, and he was very kind to people. And you know, if we were out and about, I mean, we would go. You know, when you're traveling, you know, you'd stop at a laundromat,
Mm,
and you know, he would be doing like he would be folding the clothes. You know, and I'd be sitting down or waiting for the dryer. You know, my daughter and I, we would, you know, whatever, and this man said, "Oh my gosh, Alpha the Wild Samoan is in my laundry and he's folding clothes." And I just kind of looked at him and I said, "Well, he better." You know, I mean, like we're normal people. We, you know, do all the normal things like everybody else. But it is, you know, when you meet people and, you know, you kind of like look at them, you kind of idolize them. And we never wanted that. We always wanted to be approachable and let people know that we're just like everybody else, you know.
right.
And so, and I think that's always worked for us. You know, um, we've always been involved with special needs. We've always been involved with so many charities, and just anywhere we can volunteer and give our love and give our support, we were always there. So, but you know, the wrestling does change things a lot. So,
Especially during the days that the Wild Samoans in the era that they were in professional wrestling. This is an era
mhm,
of keeping kayfabe. So
yes.
this is my question to you. At the height of them being heels, was there ever times you guys are out in public and the loving, adoring, big-hearted man that you're married to had to switch to being that wild Samoan that was getting heat, the heel, the bad guy? And if so, even though I'm sure you may have been used to it, at the same time, it had to make you feel a certain way at times as well.
The nice thing I think for us was that he was so intimidating. His look, and he just had to look at you and kind of turn his head and bug out those eyes, you know, and you didn't want to approach him. You just tip your distance. And so I think that saved us a lot of times.
Yeah. Now, talk about you for a second.
Mhm.
And if this is wrong, forgive me. I'm at the mercy of the internet whenever I'm researching people. You are
Sure.
a life coach, is that correct?
I am a certified life coach. That is correct. A motivational speaker. Yes.
So, at what point did you decide to start doing this? Was it during these days that you became a life coach, or was it afterwards? Talk to me about that.
Okay. So um, I would say it was in 2014, and it was a really rough time. I had just turned 50, I believe I was, and I was starting to have health complications. I gained a lot of weight. I was always, very thin and very fit and very healthy. And then all of a sudden I woke up at 50 and I'm 198 pounds, and it
Right.
was, it wasn't even so much the weight as it was like the cholesterol and the blood sugar was getting up and, the blood pressure and all of that. And I was starting to have health complications. So I decided, okay, I need to do something, and I went to the doctors and I said, I have a thyroid condition, something's wrong with me. And my doctor, who was very old school, looked at me and said, you have an eating condition. You need to lose weight. You need to get healthy. You need to get fit. And so after I got over myself and I started to, really sit down and learn what was going on in my life, I lost the game, as you can see behind me. I lost the weight, but I gained my life. I gained my health. I gained back, that everything that was missing in my life. And so through that, I started doing seminars and workshops and trying to help other people. And it didn't start out like anything more than just sharing my story, sharing my journey. And as I went on with it, that's when I realized that, I can go out there and help other people. And so I took my certification to become a life coach and I started speaking at different events and I've been doing it ever since.
There's something else that you guys were involved with that I think is awesome that I want you to talk about. That the Usos Foundation.
Yes.
Talk to
Yes.
me
I'm
about the
glad you
Usos
brought that
Foundation.
up. So back in the early, I guess it was the mid to 2000s, maybe 1990 something, 2000. We had a training center in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and the training center had moved a few times because of, we didn't own the building. There were different locations that we were at. We had two locations at one time. So we winded up in this place, in this old historic building downtown in Allentown. And there was a young boy that was outside and looking in our windows when we were trained. And so one day, Arthur came out and snuck up on him, scared the life out of the kid. And he's like, "What are you doing out here?" "Oh, I'm looking in the windows." He goes, "No, what are you doing out here in front of my place?" Well, he was, selling marijuana or whatever he was doing. And he was a young kid, 14 years old. And so before I can even open my mouth and say a word, Arthur said, "Go home, get your parents, bring your report card, come back, and I'll train you for free." And I'm like, "You can't
Wow.
train him. He's 14 years old. He's a kid, whatever." So the kid came with his parents and he had all F's and, pretty bad. Now he's a great kid from a really good, hardworking family, but they lived in a project. They lived in a really rough area, and this kid used to dodge bullets to go home. And so he needed a break. He needed someone to give him that opportunity, and we did. We gave him 3 months. He got his grades up, and we trained him. And that's how the Usos Foundation started. We just started doing it. Didn't know anything about it, and as far as like being a 501c3 or all that. So our friend, who was a very successful teacher, we did a lot of events with him to help at-risk youth. So he kind of helped us through, and that's how USOS became a nonprofit foundation, which I was
That's
very proud of. We did a lot of good. We saved a lot of lives. Yeah.
yeah, that's just awesome. Now, back during your husband's days in professional wrestling, the Wild Samoans, and those with the Ano Anoa'i family,
Hmm.
they were very much kind of the characters of being uncivilized, which is one of the things that people were scared of, right? Then we started to see that slowly change into what we now have with the new Anoa'i. But I'm going to like. one day I'm going to say it
You'll get
perfectly. Yep,
it.
yep. But today they're presented more of just a regular type Joe, but just really good at what they do because of
Mhm.
the foundation that was built. With Jacob Fatu, I think it is the closest one that is kind of portrayed closer to what the Wild Samoans were.
Mhm.
What do you think of the new family and how they're portrayed on television today? Do you like what they're doing? Do you wish they would go back kind of to that old school, the day of the Wild Samoans? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I'm very proud of all of my nephews and everything that they're doing. But it's like anything else. When Alpha and Sika started, it was not a gimmick. That was
Right.
Alpha and Sika. They were born in the island of Samoa. They were young kids that would jump off the cliff and dive for coins when the military ships would come in. They wore their Polynesian lava lava skirts and were barefooted and climbed coconut trees, and that's who they honestly truly were. So, as time goes by and, families get more educated and, come to America and go to school and get educated, and that's what you're seeing today. You're seeing these kids that are college graduates that have, they still have that blood. They can snap on a dime and go wild, but they're a different breed. Just, I've always loved the wild Samoans, their, personalities, their way of doing things. But this new generation, obviously, they are, um, the road was paved for them in a sense, and now they're getting to go out there and perform and show their athletic ability and their smarts. And I often think they didn't speak English when they came here.
Oh, really?
They didn't read, they didn't write. Yeah, that's
Wow.
legit. When you hear those stories and
Yeah.
see all that stuff on the internet, that was legit. They
Wow.
were
That,
born in an island where they didn't need to know English or anything because you're born there, you die there.
right.
And they had an opportunity to come to San Francisco. Their parents were in the ministry, and that's how they eventually came and learned.
Right. Now, I have to say this because I didn't say anything until it all came out, but
Hmm.
I was the first podcast people who really broke that Naomi was pregnant, except I couldn't say it that way. When Lynn came on the podcast and she knew I was talking about, all I said was, is I hear the bloodline may be continuing, and you said what you said. So get your bell rung podcast was the first one to break that story. I'm so glad that when she announced it, I was so happy for them.
Me
Um,
too. Thrilled, very thrilled.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now I asked you who's your favorite right now. Now you said Roman Reigns. But let's talk about the Usos for a second here.
Hmm.
Um, do you feel like they have been represented and pushed enough? Because obviously, it seems like Roman Reigns was really the guy that they really want to give that push to. We seen Jay got the push, he got that world title. But what do you think about what WWE has been doing with them, and as far as the push that they gave them as single competitors? It seems like they were going really pushing Jay, Big Jim, wasn't pushed as much. What do you think about that? And is there any real competition between the twins that you know of as far as their wrestling careers?
Well, I have to be honest. I don't really watch wrestling anymore.
Right.
Alpha, he kind of stopped watching it, some years ago. I mean, he always would watch his, the kids' matches, whatever, but he kind of stopped watching it. And so when he did, I kind of stopped watching it as well. So I honestly, that sounds crazy. You don't really know what's going on out there in the wrestling world. But I will tell you that every one of them work really hard, and they are so talented and gifted, and you put them in the ring, they're going to shine. Any of the kids, they're going to shine. And so I think they're a very close family, and the twins, you're not going to separate those boys. They are twins. And they're just an amazing family, and they love each other, and they work hard to work together, and I love that about them. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm
Now,
really really proud of that.
Do you get to see them or speak to them often?
Not, it's like any other big family where, and in this case,
Yeah.
they travel so much. I stay in touch with several of them, and, I'll text them and I'll get text right back when they're available to text me.
Right.
But, yeah, but, we see them when we can because they're just so busy and
Right.
we're all over the place. Everybody lives in a
Right.
different state, or so it's hard. Yeah.
Now, traveling the wild Samoans as much as you did, back
Mhm.
then, women wrestling really wasn't as big as it is now, which really meant that when your husband was out in the ring, you were left near the rest of the boys, or maybe you were watching the match. I'm not sure, but can you talk about particularly close friendships that you made back then with the talent?
I've made many, many friends, and that was a blessing. When he was wrestling, when Alpha was wrestling with WWE, there's always that core group that become your very good friends, and I mean stories that just can go on forever. Some of the fun ones that he used to share with his wrestling students, Alpha and most of the Simone family, with the exception of, I believe it was Yokozuna, Rodney. Everybody is a 49er fan. And so, like there was a time where the 49ers were playing against Dallas, and the Dallas had made a touchdown, and we were living in Pensacola, and the phone rang, and office said, "Do not pick up the phone." Why the phone's ringing? Do not pick up the phone. Okay, so after the fifth or sixth ring, the voicemail, I'm going back where the recording come on and you can hear it, thank you for calling, da 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 da. And then you hear the beep and you hear, rest in peace, 49ers. So I'm sure you know who that was.
Yeah.
And then a few minutes later, we'd get the lead and offer was like, give me that phone, and he'd call, and this was the kind of fun stuff. And like the midget wrestlers, they always stayed with us. They always stayed at my house, and my daughter actually wrote a book called Growing Up Wrestling, and she tells stories that are just so adorable, so funny about her life growing up with different people, but they were always with us. My beautiful Leilani, Luna Vachon, Sherry Martel, all of those girls, they they were always with us, always traveling with us, always in our home, and it was just like it just went on like that. So many people, it's just incredible. Yeah. And then as we changed over and we were running the school and the promotion, then the new generation was coming by. I have a basement full of bodies that I would step over every weekend, staying at our house. So it was just incredible.
Now, obviously, your husband's legacy lives through you and his
Mhm.
children.
Yes.
And it's also obvious that every day of your life, you're doing something that honors your husband's legacy. Same thing as your children. But is
Mhm.
there one particular thing that you just love doing that honors Offa's legacy?
Ooh, I I received the title of moms many, many years ago. And that was because we were kind of the surrogate mom and dad to all of these kids. And when I say kids, these guys and girls that would come to us, they would come from all over the world. And, imagine one of your sons says, I want to go to Europe and I want to wrestle. And they just made up their mind and that's it. And then you take them there and they're going to stay for 6 months on a visa and they have nowhere to stay. So they have to stay in like an extended stay hotel. They can't work, and you're worried sick about them. So we would make sure that they were with us on the holidays, that they had a hot meal, that they were taken care of. So I became the mom. So I think for me, it's the fact that I am still so very close to so many of these men and women, and I am mom. And that just is the way I can honor his legacy, that he knows I'm carrying on through him.
Can you share? It's kind of two stories that I'm going to ask here.
Okay.
Can you share your favorite story of Offa, your husband, not the Wild Samoan, your
Mhm.
husband? And then share a story about the Wild Samoans.
Okay. see. One of my favorite office stories. I think I'd have to say we were we were in Italy. We were in Italy, and we did a wrestling camp. And so the whole time we were there, during the day he was training. We were on the rooftop of a gym, so it was hot. We were training, and just showing like what wrestling is about to these kids because there was no wrestling there at the time. And then he made sure that every day that we had time to be together to make sure that we were eating the right foods and getting enough rest and sitting by the pool and just sharing that quality time. He was always so, this is my wife, make sure she's taken care of, always making sure that I was taken care of. And in Italy, he really went way beyond to make sure that I was happy, mainly because, I'm Italian, but he wanted to make sure that I was treated the way that he felt I deserved. And anybody and everybody that would listen, he would tell them, this is my wife and you need to look out for her and you need to take care of her. And it was just such a beautiful memory of how proud he was, and how much he really looked out and cared about me. And that was so special. Um, the Wild Samoan, a story that comes to mind. We were driving from Pennsylvania up to Maine. And we got there a little bit late because we had to give the dog a bath. And, the dog always came with us, a big white snowball. So we get up there, Samoyed, with our dog, and we get to the hotel, and the promoter says, please follow my son. You guys have to get to the building, the show and whatever. So the guy, the promoter's son, I mean, I saw one thing, Officer saw another thing. He went like this in the mirror to kind of say, okay, follow me. Asa thought that he gave him a finger.
Oh my gosh.
So the whole time we're driving, he's cursing and he's mad. And I'm like, what's wrong with you? And I'm going to kick his neck. And I said, no, you just need to calm down, whatever. No, don't protect them. Okay. So we get to the place. The guy pulls up in his little car. He opens up the trunk. Asa gets out of the car, goes around the car, grabs the guy, has him by the throat. He's dangling in there. His feet are sticking out, and he's choking him. And walks by Paul, Mr. Wonderful, Ondorf. And the kid, who is probably in his 30s, is screaming, help, help. And he goes, no, I'm not getting in no fight with Alpha. Whatever's going on there, that's with you guys. So it took a minute to get that release, but I got him and got him inside. And but yeah, that's kind of how Alpha was when he become the Wild Samoan.
Yeah, I can imagine there's not very many people who wanted to get on the bad sides of Osmoans. I want to
Yeah.
go back to the 16-year-old or the 18-year-old Lynn and your father. You said that your father absolutely wasn't having it. Now, if I was going to assume, if I was making an assumption myself, just listening to all the stories, not just from you, but from other people about just how good of a man Alpha
Hmm.
was, I have to guess that your father ended up loving Alpha. I know you said he was very sick.
Hmm.
Is that what happened? Did he end up loving Alpha, or did he not have a chance to actually really get to know him because of his
Yeah.
illness?
Yeah, unfortunately, he didn't get to know him the way I wanted him to know him. But yeah, I mean, he softened up. My dad softened up a little bit, but your daughter and you're younger and you're, just this man that's going to have a girl in every town and, all the things that, you're going to think. But yeah, but it was okay.
Yep.
We
Now,
had a long, long life.
what about your mom?
My mom, she grew to love him. It was funny because she always had that kind of fear. She always saw him as like I saw him as a big teddy bear, but she saw him like this big wild man, and she's seen him snap many a times. And when we do our wrestling shows or do our trainings or whatever, he would go off. He would snap. He would yell and scream and throw things and carry on. And So my mom always was afraid of him in a sense, not afraid of him with me, but just like kind of afraid of him. So she kind of just, kept her little distance a little bit. But
Right.
yeah.
Now, I know you've described Alpha, the family man. You've described him
Hmm.
as Alpha, the Lost Samoan. Talk to me about Alpha, the man, the human being. If there was one thing you really wanted people to know about him as a human being, what would that be?
That he was someone who cared. He loved people. And, you know, when I was always a very private person. And so when we got together, I go from my little tiny piece of the world to now I'm out there, traveling and in the spotlight with him and running events and, all of the things that we did. So I used to say he collected people. He would meet people. And if you did right by him and he felt, that because he would wear his heart on his sleeve, he really did. And if he met you and you were nice to him and he, felt a good vibe with you, you were part of the family. That was it. And you're just my son, whatever. And that's just how he did things and just loved people so much and cared so much. And so that's the part of him that I really want people to know. And on his tombstone, it says someone who cared.
Mm,
And the reason I did that was he did interviews for as long as I knew him. 40 plus years he would do interviews. And we did an interview with WWE at our training camp in Pennsylvania at the time. And he had been asked probably every question from, the years and years. There was nothing else you can ask this man. So finally, he got a question that no one ever asked him. And they said, Pops, because everybody called him Pops, Pops, when this whole thing is done, when it's all over and you meet your maker, how do you want to be remembered? What do you want on your tombstone? And he didn't even hesitate. He just looked over at me and he said, I wanted to say someone who cared. And then he looks
wow.
back and he goes, now you remember I said that. I said, okay. And I did remember that. And that's on his tombstone. Yeah.
I have a friend of mine who's a professional wrestler, and
Hmm.
anytime he has to be a heel, his other half absolutely hates it. Hates him being a heel because of the headache that comes with it. People don't realize the headache it can, that can be had because of your spouse being a heel in professional wrestling.
Right.
Did you ever go through that at all? Or was it, and correct me if I'm wrong, because, back during the Wild Small Lace, I was still very young. I very much remember so many of their matches. But were they ever baby faces very often?
No.
I didn't think so.
Not
So
very
you,
often. Few
right, so
times,
you're
not
probably
very
accustomed.
often.
So you're probably just accustomed to him being a heel all the time
Yes,
then.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Few times, few places he was the face, but no, he was just, you know, the
Right.
big heel. Yeah.
Now I'm gonna go back to Lynn, the young lady. When you graduated from school, were there plans for you to go to college? To like, what did you want to be in life?
Well, I'll tell you, at one point, and it was when my dad was sick, I was going to be a nurse. I was taking care of him and I would bring him for his cancer treatments. He had lung cancer. And I was it was so easy to take care of my dad. And I was able to, do everything that needs to be done. And the doctor just looked at me and he said, I will pay for you to go to school to become a nurse if you promise to give me 5 years and work for me. And I thought about it, and I was like, no, you don't want to work. You can be with me. You're gonna run the business, you're gonna travel and whatever. But that would have been something I think I would have been really good at. I think I would have really enjoyed. But I think my destiny. I had a lot of things that I enjoyed doing, but I think my destiny was to be by his side and keeping him out of trouble, doing damage control, and just building this big extended family of people.
Yeah, I have a feeling, and I don't know you very well, just from talking to you, I get the sense that the bottom line about you, and tell me if I'm wrong, you're a nurturer.
Yes,
Is that?
very much.
Yeah, yeah. Now,
Mm-hmm.
last question for you. We've
Mm-hmm.
talked about Alpha's legacy. I want to know about what your legacy, what you want your legacy to be. What do you want to be remembered for? Because look, sure, he was the quote unquote celebrity, he was the
Mm-hmm.
legendary wrestler. You're definitely making a mark in this world, though, and you've been making a mark in this world even during the time when he was wrestling. Because again, you're a nurturer. You're the one that people look to kind of embrace them, take care of them.
Mm-hmm.
You're traveling motivational speaker. In many ways, this is again you being a nurturer.
Yes.
So, what do you want to be remembered for? What is your mark?
Well, I'll tell you, um, I write a blog in addition to everything else that I do. And this last blog that just published on Monday was kind of me getting it all out, and like when I met you in Vegas, for an example, I had just came straight from Pensacola. It was August 16th was the 1 year anniversary of the death. So our daughter and my son-in-law, we drove over to Pensacola, met up with her brothers and sisters and the grandkids and the great grandkids, and we were at the cemetery early in the morning, and we spent a beautiful day together. And then I got on the plane Sunday morning and headed to Vegas. And so I this past whole year was the first of everything. And the first birthday without him, and the anniversary, and so on and so on and so on. And it was also the first time that I have ever been referred to as office widow. And that was, everybody introduced me as, oh, this is either office wife or office widow. And it was like that reality, slapped me in the face a little bit, that wow, okay, I've made it through this time now, and now I need to look at who I am. And that's actually what I did in my blog. And I talked about, for from 16 years old until last year, I was this person who dedicated my life to my family, to raising the kids and the grandkids, and being there for everybody, and running this business, and building all of the legacy that we did. And now I wake up and it's, who are you? Who is
Right.
Lynn now? I knew who Lynn was, but now who is Lynn? And I think that you're right. I am a person that gives. I give so much. And my friend told me many years ago, don't give until it hurts, give until it feels good.
Right.
And that's what I do. I work in special needs, and that's my passion and my love. And I have my foundation work, and I lost to gain, and I volunteer, and I keep myself very, very busy with helping others. And I'm still very much mom to all of the men and women. We did a memorial for Alpha on August the 3rd here where I live in Florida, and it was incredible to hear the stories and how they talked about this man and what he did for their lives. But they also said, but mom, we have to thank you for what you did for us. So I
Right.
think that my legacy will be the person that helped Alpha to, because he went from being that mega star to being Pops. And I loved him as a star, but I loved him more as the Pops. And I think I'll carry that legacy. I'll carry that, into my old age, and I'll continue to share, my inspiration and motivation to live a strong, healthy life, and to never, don't ever let time go by without telling the people who are in your life that you love them, because you
Right.
just don't know what the next minute is going to bring. I used to
I
say what tomorrow's going to bring, but
right.
now I say what the next minute is going to
Yeah.
bring.
You know what? I do not hang up the phone, or I don't leave my
Mhm.
house, or I don't leave my friend's house without saying I love you.
Yes.
Like that is the number one rule. My people often
Mhm.
ask, how are you and your wife so successful? I say two things. One, we're friends. We actually like hanging out with one
Yes.
another. And secondly, we don't go to bed mad at each other ever,
Ever.
ever.
It's wonderful.
Um, and that's awesome that you work with special needs people. I work with special needs people. I've been doing it for a couple of
Mhm.
years. I actually retired. I was blessed enough to do well in my life. I was able to retire a few years ago, but I got bored. So
Mhm.
I didn't want to just get a job. I wanted to do something that I enjoy. I enjoy work with special needs people.
Yeah.
And after a couple of years, I often say this, these individuals are the ones that are tagged special needs, that have mental health issues. But I often question, is it us normal people? Are we
Mm.
the ones that actually have the issues? Because the individuals that I work with and every single one of my clients, so kind, so loving,
Right.
um, that I think that us as quote unquote normal people, there's a lot to learn from special needs people,
Absolutely. Yes. Because when they love you, they love you. Yes.
right?
Yes.
Absolutely. Before we shut down, say someone wants to book you to, come and to be a motivational speaker at an event of theirs. Where can they find you at?
Sure. So my email is ilosttogain@gmail.com for the I Lost to Gain business. They can also send me a message on the Facebook or the Instagram, I Lost to Gain, and I Lost to Gain Club on Instagram. And I'd be more than happy to talk.
Perfect. Do me a favor. Once this ends, DM me that web address so I can attach it to this when I release this. That way people will have it. Look, I have to say thank you for multiple things. Thank you, one, for sharing your husband with us, because that's exactly what you did. You shared part of your life, your husband, with the wrestling fans so that we could be entertained. Thank you for being so kind to me at Vegas, even though, guys, look, I butchered her. I have a speech impediment, right? But that does
No,
not
it's
excuse how much I butchered the last name. And I felt so, that was the most embarrassed I've ever felt in my life, man. I was like, oh my God,
no,
look,
not at all.
there's multiple royal families in professional wrestling, but the Anoa'i family is to me the top of the top when it comes to royal families. And for me to butcher that name, I was like, oh my gosh. So thank you for being so gracious about that.
Absolutely.
And thank you for taking your time out to come to this podcast to talk about your life, because it's not easy opening up, your life for the world to look
Hmm.
into, as much as you already have and as much as you still are doing. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you. And I appreciate you having me on as well. And it's just, I'm so happy for what you're doing. And, this interview was so wonderful. It gave me a chance, to remember a lot of things and to smile when I think of Alpha. And it's just a beautiful thing. So
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you so much, guys. Please join me and Mark tomorrow for the recap of SmackDown. And it wouldn't it be awesome if I could twist Lynn's arm a little bit, get together, watch just one show to do a review one night on our shows? I'll try to work on that, guys. Lynn, thank you so much. You have a great weekend.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank
Everybody,
you.
you
All
all
right.
have a
Have a
great
good
weekend.
one.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Yeah.